My parents gave my sister a $100K for her wedding and told me, "You don't deserve help." I cut ties. 3 years later, she saw my 2-month-old house and called Mom in tears. "Why does she have that?" I was standing in front of a jewelry store window on Maple Street looking at wedding rings. Not because I was getting married. I hadn't even had a boyfriend in the last year and a half. I just sometimes stopped by on my way home from work, looked at these little rings that cost as much as 3 months of my salary and thought, when? When will it be my turn? The phone rang just as I was looking at a thin ring with a small diamond. Mom! I froze. We hadn't spoken in a month, maybe more. Lately, our calls had become increasingly rare and cold. "Hello?" "Diana." My mother's voice sounded excited, almost festive. "Your sister is getting married. Will you come over for dinner on Saturday? We need to discuss the wedding." I was silent for about 5 seconds. Something tightened in my stomach. "Gwen is getting married?" I finally managed to say. She's 22. So what?" Mom laughed. "She met her prince, Dexter, such a handsome guy from a good family. Are you coming?" I didn't want to. God, how I didn't want to, but I said, "Okay, I'll come." That Saturday, I sat in my car in front of my parents' house for 10 minutes before I forced myself to get out. It was a large 2-story house in a wealthy neighborhood with a neat lawn and 3 cars in the driveway. One of them, a red sports car, I didn't recognize. Gwen had probably been given another toy. My mother opened the door, gave me a quick hug, as if for show, and led me into the dining room. My father was already sitting at his place at the head of the table. Ralph Kershaw, 56 years old, owner of a chain of car dealerships. Gray temples, an expensive watch, a gaze that always appraised. Gwen sat to his right, all smiles in a new dress, holding the hand of a tall, dark-haired man in his 30s. "Diana!" Gwen jumped up. "Finally!" "Meet Dexter. Dexter, this is my older sister." Dexter smiled, revealing perfectly even teeth, and held out his hand. A firm handshake, a confident gaze. Too confident. "Nice to meet you, Diana. Gwen has told me a lot about you." I doubt it, I thought, but smiled back and sat down in my usual place, to the left, away from my father. Dinner began with Gwen telling the story of how they met. A charity event for an animal shelter, champagne. Dexter approaching first. A classic story. I listened with half an ear, swallowing my salad and trying not to think about how much I didn't want to be there. And then Gwen raised her hand, showing off a ring that probably cost more than my annual food budget. "He proposed a month ago, on the shore of a lake under the stars." It was so romantic. Mom clapped her hands. "We're so happy for you, sweetheart." Dad nodded, smiling, a rare display of emotion for him. "Dexter, you made the right choice. Gwen is a special girl." I stared at my plate. Always. Gwen is special. Gwen is talented. Gwen is needed. And me? I'm just Diana. Independent Diana. Diana who has to cope on her own. And we've decided, Dad cleared his throat, Beatrice and I have discussed this at length, and we want to give Gwen and Dexter the wedding of their dreams. $100,000 for the organization. I almost choked on my salad. $100,000? Jesus Christ. $100,000. Gwen blushed, hugged her mother, then her father. Dexter looked pleased, but not surprised. He probably already knew. They must have planned it. I sat there, and something inside me began to burn. Not envy, no, not quite. Pain, an old, familiar pain. I remembered how, at 16, I had asked my father to give me money for a class trip to Washington. "We don't have any extra money right now, Diana. Study harder, get a scholarship." And a month later, Gwen, who was 13, got a new room, completely renovated with designer furniture. I remembered how, at 21, I asked to borrow money for the down payment on an apartment. You're an adult, Diana. It's time to learn to be independent." And at 18, Gwen got a new car just like that for her birthday. And now, $100,000 for the wedding. Mom, Dad, my throat tightened, but I forced myself to speak. This is wonderful for Gwen, really? But I have to ask. Dad looked at me, his eyebrows flying up. Yes, Diana. When my time comes, when I meet someone. Will you help me too? Not necessarily 100,000, just something. There was silence. Mom stopped smiling. Gwen looked away. Dexter kept a neutral expression, but I could see the corners of his mouth twitching. Dad put down his fork. He wiped his mouth with his napkin. He looked at me with that cold stare he used to appraise cars at auctions. Diana, he said in the tone used to explain something very obvious to a child, you've always been independent. You don't need our support the way Gwen does. She's more delicate. She needs help. You're strong. You can handle it on your own. I waited for him to continue. He didn't. Then my mother added, as if trying to soften the blow, besides, sweetheart, we paid for your education. College cost us a lot of money. That was also an investment in you. Dad nodded. That's right. You don't deserve any help. You already got the education we paid for. Be grateful for that. I don't deserve it. Those words hit me somewhere under the ribs, knocking the air out of me. I don't deserve it, not help, not for 100,000, not for anything. I sat and looked at them all. At my father, who calmly continued eating. At my mother, who was smiling at Gwen again. At my sister, who suddenly became very interested in her glass of wine. At Dexter, who winked at Gwen. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, quietly, like a thin glass thread that had been stretched for years and finally snapped. I got up. I put my napkin on the table and picked up my bag. Diana? Mom looked up. Where are you going? Home, I said. My voice sounded calm. Too calm. Thanks for dinner. But we haven't discussed the wedding details yet. Gwen finally looked at me. Oh, you're my maid of honor, right? I stopped at the door, turned around, looked at her, my younger sister who always got everything she wanted. No, Gwen, I'm not. And I left. The next morning, I woke up in my small one-bedroom apartment, which I paid for myself, and did 3 things. First, I blocked my parents' numbers. Second, I blocked Gwen's number. Third, I deleted them from all social media. I spent a week in a daze. I went to work at a logistics company, where I was a regular project coordinator, earned my modest salary, and returned to my empty apartment. And I thought a lot. About the fact that I was 25, that I had achieved nothing, that no one needed me, not even my own parents. And then I remembered my Uncle Vernon Kershaw, my father's younger brother, 51 years old, owner of a logistics company. When I last saw him 5 years ago at my grandmother's funeral, my father didn't talk to him. Some old family feud, something about inheritance and betrayal. But I remembered how my uncle came up to me then, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "If you need anything, Deanna, let me know." I found his number in my old contacts. I dialed. My heart was pounding. "Hello?" A low, slightly hoarse voice. "Uncle Vernon, it's Diana Kershaw." Pause. "Diana, what's wrong? Can I come see you? I need some advice." An hour later, I was sitting in his office, a small office on the outskirts of town, a sign that read, "TransLink Solutions," the smell of coffee and paper. Vernon looked older than I remembered, more gray hair, wrinkles around his eyes, but his gaze was the same, attentive, intelligent. He listened to me. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and was silent for a long time. "Your father," he finally said, "has always been blind to the obvious. He only sees what he wants to see. Gwen is his little princess, and you remind him of his own fears, that he, too, was once unplanned, that his parents didn't want him either." I stared at him. "What?" "History repeats itself, Diana. Only he doesn't understand that." Vernon leaned forward. "But you know what? You can change that. If you want to prove him wrong, I'll give you a chance, but you'll have to work like hell. I don't give gifts, not even to relatives, especially not to relatives. I straightened up. I'm ready to work. Anything. Vernon smiled for the first time ever. Then welcome to the family business, niece. I held out my hand, he shook it firmly, and I responded in kind. When do I start? 3 years is a long time and a short time at the same time. Long when every day you have to prove to someone else and yourself that you are worth something. Short when you look back and realize how much has changed. I started at the bottom. Uncle Vernon wasn't joking when he said he didn't give gifts. For the first 6 months, I was an assistant, printing documents, delivering coffee, answering phone calls. My salary barely covered my rent. I arrived at 7 in the morning and left at 9 in the evening. I studied, I observed, I listened. Vernon ran the company with a firm but fair hand. He couldn't stand lies, laziness, or incompetence. But he valued initiative. When, after 4 months, I suggested optimizing the cargo accounting system, he looked at me in surprise, read my report, and said, "Implement it. If it works, I'll promote you." It worked. The company saved about 30% of the time spent processing orders. I was made an analyst. For the next year and a half, I dug into logistics like a hungry person. I studied routes, suppliers, customs procedures, and contracts. Vernon gave me increasingly complex projects. I never let him down. I worked until I dropped, fell asleep over spreadsheets, and learned terminology I had never even heard before. And then he made me a project coordinator. A year later, he made me senior manager. 28 years old, senior manager at a logistics company that served half the state. A salary I couldn't have dreamed of 3 years ago, the respect of my colleagues, and most importantly, confidence. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of my life. During those 3 years, I moved, first to another city, 2 hours away from my parents. I rented an apartment, then bought a small studio. A year later, I sold it and took out a mortgage on a 2-room apartment in a new building. I was surrounded by new people who didn't know my story. They saw me simply as Diana. Smart, hardworking, reliable. I made real friends, not out of obligation. My colleagues, Roxana and James, sometimes invited me to dinner. We talked about work, movies, life. They didn't ask about my family, and I was grateful to them. I even started seeing a therapist, a woman named Kathleen, 48 years old, calm, attentive. She helped me understand many things, that I was not to blame for how my parents treated me, that their choices were their responsibility, that I had a right to my own life. Over those 3 years, my mother called 4 times. From different numbers, she probably thought I wouldn't recognize her. But I always recognized her voice in the first few seconds and hung up. Once she sent me a text message, "Diana, don't be a child, call me." I deleted the message. I missed Gwen's wedding. I didn't even know the exact date. Somewhere in the spring 2 years ago, I think, I accidentally saw a photo on Instagram from a mutual friend. Gwen in a lush white dress, Dexter next to her in a tuxedo, their parents behind them with proud smiles. I looked at the photo for about 5 seconds and scrolled on. I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just emptiness. And then, 6 months ago, something happened that I was most proud of. I bought a house. Not an apartment. A house. For $2 million. Sounds crazy, right? A 28-year-old girl who 3 years ago was eating instant noodles to save on rent is buying a house for $2 million. But I did it, partly with my savings. Vernon paid me generously, and I lived modestly and saved, partly with a mortgage, but one I could afford. The bank was happy to give me a loan when they saw my salary and credit history. The house was in a good neighborhood, an hour from the office. Modern, minimalist, white walls, large windows, open floor plan, small, only 2 bedrooms, but mine. Completely mine. When I first walked in with the keys in my hand, I stood in the middle of the living room and cried. Not out of sadness, out of relief, out of pride, out of the realization that I had done it on my own, without my parents' money, without their help. I thought then, if only my father could see this. If only he could come in here and see what his independent daughter had achieved. But I immediately dismissed the thought. I didn't need his approval. Never again. Life had finally become what I wanted it to be. A fulfilling job, a house that was a home, peace. And I thought it would stay that way. And then my mother called. It was in the morning. I was having breakfast on the terrace. Coffee and toast, summer sun, birds singing. The phone rang and I didn't recognize the number. I don't usually answer unknown numbers, but this time some intuition told me to answer. Hello? Diana, it's Mom. I froze with a cup of coffee halfway to my lips. 3 years. 3 years of silence. And now she was back. How did you get this number? My throat tightened. It doesn't matter. Diana, we need to talk. It's important. I should have hung up. I should have. But something stopped me. Curiosity, old habits, I don't know. About what? Dexter needs a job. You work for Vernon, right? A big company. Maybe there are openings. I laughed out loud, not out of joy, but out of the absurdity of the situation. You're calling me for the first time in 3 years to ask for a job for Gwen's husband. Seriously. Diana, don't be like that. We're family. Family? I set the cup down so I wouldn't break it. The family that told me I didn't deserve help. The family that gave Gwen $100,000 and me nothing. That family. Are you still upset about that? Mom's voice became sharp. God, Diana, how long is this going to go on? That was a long time ago. Gwen is a married woman now. She has responsibilities. Dexter can't find a decent job that matches his qualifications, and they... Stop, I interrupted. I haven't spoken to you in 3 years. Why should I suddenly help anyone? Pause. Then my mother sighed. That signature sigh she always used to let me know I was being unreasonable. Because we're family, Diana. Because Gwen is your sister. She's very upset. Dexter deserves a decent job, not the pathetic offers he's getting. You work for a big company, you have connections, and you think I should help them after everything? You've always been so stubborn, Mom said, her voice tired. Listen, I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for your sister. She's my daughter. You're my daughter, too. Why can't you just help her? I sat and looked at my beautiful morning sky, at my terrace, at my $2 million house. And I thought, why? Why should I do anything for them? What have they done for me? But part of me, that old vulnerable part that still wanted my parents' love, was curious. What happened? Why, after 3 years of silence, did they suddenly remember me? One meeting, I said finally. I'll agree to one meeting, in a neutral place. You tell me what happened, and I'll decide if I can do anything. But I'm not making any promises. Diana, thank you. I knew you. Don't thank me, I interrupted. This isn't for you, it's for me. To finally close this chapter, send me the address of the cafe tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I hung up and covered my face with my hands. My heart was pounding. What had I done? Why did I agree to this? The next day, I was sitting in the Mocha Lounge coffee shop 20 minutes before the meeting. I ordered a latte, which I didn't drink. I just held the cup in my hands to keep my fingers busy. They came in at 2 o'clock sharp. Mom, Gwen. Without Dad? Interesting. Without Dexter, too. I hadn't seen them in 3 years, and the changes were minimal. Mom looked just as well-groomed. Fresh hairstyle, expensive bag, manicure. Gwen hadn't changed either. Same fashionable clothes, same confident gait. Only there was something new in her eyes. Irritation? Impatience? Diana. Mom tried to smile. You look great. Thanks. I didn't smile back. Tell me, what happened? Gwen looked at Mom. Mom looked at Gwen. Then Mom began, in the voice she usually used to talk about everyday annoyances. Dexter can't find a job that suits him. He's changed 6 jobs in the last 3 years. Twice he was fired because of disagreements with management. He's very principled. He can't stand incompetence. 3 times he left on his own because the conditions weren't right. The salary didn't match his qualifications. And once the company went bankrupt, but that was beyond his control. I raised an eyebrow. 6 jobs in 3 years? That's almost a new job every 6 months. He's talented, Gwen interjected, but her voice sounded more insistent than desperate. It's just that the market is tough right now. Old school managers don't want to listen to new ideas. Dexter has a vision, you see. He can't work under people who are dumber than him. I nodded silently. I understood. Dexter was one of those people who always knew better, clashed with his bosses, and blamed everyone but himself. And what do you want from me? Mom leaned forward, her voice softening, almost honeyed. You work for Vernon, at a large company. Surely there are good positions there. Dexter deserves a decent position, something at the level of manager, maybe department director. He has experience, ambition. And you want me to get him a job? I finished for her. Well, not get him a job, Gwen corrected quickly. Just help him. Recommend him. You're in good standing there, right? Vernon listens to you. 1 word from you, and Dexter will get a decent job. I looked at both of them, at my mother with her confident smile, at Gwen with her expectant gaze. They sat in front of me and asked for a favor as naturally as if 3 years of silence were nothing, as if they were entitled to my help. What about Dad? I asked. Why isn't he here? Mom waved her hand. He's busy, business. Car dealerships don't run themselves. Does he even know you came to see me? Pause. Gwen looked away. Diana, that's not important. Mom lost some of her softness. What's important is that Gwen is your sister, and if you can help, why not do it? I took a sip of my latte. It was already cold. I put down the cup and looked them in the eyes. First my mother, then Gwen. I'll give Uncle Dexter's resume to my uncle, but I can't promise anything. He makes the decisions, not me. Diana, thank you. Gwen reached across the table, but not for my hand, for her phone. I'll send you his resume right now. And you'll talk to Vernon, right? Tell him Dexter is a good candidate? I stood up. I said I'll send the resume. This is the last favor I'm doing for you. After that, we're done talking. Understand? Mom opened her mouth to say something, but I was already heading for the exit. Send the resume to my email. Mom has the address. I left the coffee shop and got in my car. My heart was pounding, but not from excitement. It was from some strange premonition. Something wasn't right here. They didn't look like people in need. They looked like people who were used to getting what they wanted. Dexter's resume arrived in my inbox the next morning. I opened it over coffee before heading to the office. Dexter Morrison, 29 years old, education. Bachelor's degree in business administration from some mediocre college work experience. A list of 6 positions over 3 years. Assistant manager at an office equipment supply company. Project coordinator at a startup that went bankrupt. Sales manager at an automotive company, logistics specialist at a transportation company, and 2 more positions, each lasting 5 to 6 months. No achievements, no specific results, just general phrases like responsible for coordination and participated in strategy development. I printed out my resume and put it in a folder. It lay on my desk all day, and I looked at it like a time bomb. In the evening, I knocked on Vernon's office door. "Come in," he said. He was sitting at his computer, glasses on his nose, a cup of coffee nearby. I went in and put the folder on his desk. "What's this?" He looked at me over his glasses. "A resume. My sister's husband is looking for a job. Mom asked me to give this to you." Vernon opened the folder and quickly scanned the text. His eyebrows rose with each line. 6 jobs in 3 years. He looked at me. "Diana, that's a red flag the size of a football field." "I know." "Then why are you bringing it to me?" I sighed and sat down on the chair opposite him. "Because Mom called for the first time in 3 years and asked me to. and I want to close this issue once and for all. If you refuse, I'll tell them I tried and they'll leave us alone." Vernon looked at the resume again. He paused. Then he took off his glasses and rubbed his nose. "Okay, I'll interview him, for your sake, but if I don't like him, I'll turn him down. And no hard feelings." "Of course," I said, standing up. "Thank you." "Don't thank me." He smiled crookedly. "I'm not doing this for your family. I'm doing this for you." The interview took place 3 days later. Dexter arrived at 10 in the morning wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my monthly food budget. His hair was perfectly styled, his smile confident, his handshake firm. I saw him from a distance as he walked past my office to Vernon's. He winked at me. I didn't respond. The interview lasted 40 minutes. When Dexter came out, he looked satisfied. 5 minutes later, Vernon called me in. "Well?" I sat down across from him. Talkative. Vernon leaned back in his chair. Ambitious. Likes to hear himself talk. He answered half of the questions with general phrases. When I asked for specific examples of his achievements, he began to make excuses. His colleagues let him down. His boss didn't understand his approach. "So, rejection?" Vernon paused. "I'll give him a chance. 1. Delivery department coordinator? Mid-level, decent salary, opportunity for growth if he shows results. But I'm not giving him anything more than that. If he wants to work, let him prove it." I nodded. "Fair enough." "Diana." Vernon looked at me seriously. "If he messes up, it will reflect on you. Do you understand?" "I understand." That same evening, Gwen called me. "Diana, Dexter told me about the offer. Coordinator? Seriously." I was sitting on the sofa in my house, my legs tucked under me, a glass of wine in my hand. "Yes, seriously. My uncle gave him a chance." "But that's an insult." Gwen's voice rose an octave. "Dexter has experience, education. He deserves at least a manager position." "Gwen, 6 jobs in 3 years is not the kind of experience to brag about. My uncle didn't want to hire him at all. He's doing me a favor." "A favor?" She laughed sharply. "You're his niece. You could have asked for better." "I didn't ask for anything," I said, taking a sip of wine. "I sent his resume. The rest is up to my uncle. Either Dexter takes this offer or keeps looking. I don't care." "Mom!" I heard a shout in the background. "Mom, talk to her!" A second later, my mother's voice came on the line. "Diana, why are you being like this? You could have helped. One word from you and Vernon would have given Dexter a better position." "No." I put the glass down so I wouldn't break it. "My uncle gave Dexter what he deserves based on his resume. I'm not going to pressure him. It's more than I got when I started out." "You've always been selfish," my mother said coldly and hung up. I sat and stared at the phone. Selfish. Again. Dexter accepted the offer. A week later, he started work. I saw him sometimes in the hallways, at meetings. He was always smiling, joking, trying to fit in. But something about his behavior was annoying. He talked as if he were the boss here, as if being a coordinator was temporary, and soon everyone would see how talented he was. The first few months were more or less normal. Dexter did his job, not perfectly, but acceptably. Vernon didn't say anything, so there were no complaints. But I heard conversations. Roxanne, my colleague, once said at lunch, "Your brother-in-law is a little strange." "Why?" "He constantly tells everyone that he's only working here temporarily, that he has big plans, that he deserves more, and he always emphasizes that he's related to Vernon through you, as if that gives him some kind of privilege." I clenched my teeth. "He's not my son-in-law, he's my sister's husband, and I don't talk to them." "Well, tell him that," Roxanne laughed, "because everyone already thinks he's here because of his connections." I didn't say anything then. I should have. Maybe if I had, things would have turned out differently. 6 months after Dexter started working, I was sitting in a meeting when James, our logistics analyst, burst into the room. He looked stunned. "Vernon, we need to talk urgently." Vernon stood up. "What happened?" "The contract with Elite Cargo. The shipment didn't arrive on time." They are terminating the contract and demanding compensation. Everyone at the table froze. Elite Cargo is one of our biggest clients. It's a $300,000 contract. How did it not arrive? Vernon was already heading for the exit. Who's responsible? Dexter Morrison. He changed the delivery route without consulting the client. The shipment was 3 days late. I felt a chill run down my spine. Vernon turned and looked at me. His face was stony. Diana, my office. Now. I got up and followed him. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Dexter was already sitting in the office. He looked angry, not guilty. Vernon, he began as soon as we entered. I can explain everything. I was acting in the best interests of the company. The old route was inefficient. I found a better option that... You didn't agree the changes with the client, Vernon interrupted him coldly. You arbitrarily changed the route that was specified in the contract. Because of you, the shipment was 3 days late. The client is terminating the contract and demanding $300,000 in compensation. But I thought that... You didn't think. Vernon sat down at the table. You decided you knew better. You didn't ask. You didn't check. You just did it your way. Dexter clenched his fists. I was trying to improve the process. If the client had been more flexible? The client pays us to do what he wants, not what we think is right. That's the basis of business, Morrison. You can't blame me, E. Dexter stood up abruptly. Vernon Kershaw is my relative. You're not my relative, Vernon said so calmly that it sent a chill down my spine. You're the husband of Diana's sister, with whom she is not on speaking terms. That doesn't make us relatives, and it certainly doesn't give you the right to slack off and hide behind my name. Dexter turned to me. Diana, tell him you can stand up for me. I looked at him and said nothing. My throat was so tight that I couldn't get a word out. Oh, Diana. Dexter, I finally said, you made a mistake. I can't stand up for you. He stared at me as if I had hit him. Ungrateful, we're family. Get out of my office. Vernon stood up. You're fired. Get your things and leave. Security will escort you out. Dexter wanted to say something, but Vernon gave him such a look that he shut his mouth. He turned and left, slamming the door behind him. We were left alone. Vernon sat down and stared at the table for a long time. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I didn't... You warned me. He looked up at me wearily. You said it was a red flag. I gave him a chance anyway. My mistake. But I recommended him. It's on me, too. Yes, he nodded. On you, too. Remember that, Diana. In business, every recommendation is part of your reputation. And if a person lets you down, you let them down, too. I nodded and left the office. My hands were shaking. That same evening, Gwen called me. Then my mom. Then Gwen again. I didn't answer the phone. Finally, I got a message from my mom. You ruined your sister's life. You could have put in a good word for him, but you didn't. You're selfish. Don't call us anymore, and I read it and blocked the number. For good this time. The next month was difficult. I worked even harder trying to prove to Vernon and myself that I hadn't screwed up. Dexter disappeared from my life. So did Gwen and my parents. I thought it was over, that I was finally free, and then, a month later, Vernon called me into his office. I went in. He was sitting at his desk, looking grim. There was a folder in front of him. Sit down, he said, pointing to a chair. I sat down. My heart started beating faster again. Something was wrong. Vernon opened the folder and turned it toward me. On the table was a printed letter. Letter of recommendation. My company letterhead, my email, my position. The letter stated that I, Diana Kershaw, Senior Manager at TransLink Solutions, personally recommend Dexter Morrison for the position of Regional Director at Freightway Inc., our direct competitor. The letter described Dexter's outstanding abilities, his strategic thinking, and leadership qualities. The letter was dated 2 weeks after Dexter's dismissal. I stared at the document, and the world around me narrowed to that sheet of paper. There was a signature at the bottom. It looked like mine, but it wasn't my signature. Similar, but not mine. I looked up at Vernon. This isn't me. No. His voice was cold as ice. Then who? I don't know. I didn't write this letter. I didn't even know Dexter had joined Freightway. Diana. Vernon leaned forward. This is your letterhead, your email, your signature. The letter came from your address. But I didn't send it. My hands were shaking. Vernon, believe me, I would never. I trusted you. He interrupted me quietly, and it was worse than a shout. I took you in when your family turned their backs on you. I taught you. I promoted you. I believed in you. And behind my back, you're helping this loser get a job with the competition and to a top position. No, I stood up abruptly. I didn't do that. Someone forged that letter. Who? Vernon stood up too. Who could have done that, Diana? Who has access to your email, to your letterhead? I opened my mouth and fell silent. I had no answer. Not yet. Go. Vernon turned away. I need to think. I left the office on wobbly legs. I stopped in the hallway and leaned against the wall. My heart was beating like crazy. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had gained access to my email or my forms. Someone wanted to destroy me. And I knew who it was. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa in my house with my laptop on my knees, going over everything in my head. Someone had forged my letter. Someone had gained access to my documents. Someone wants to destroy everything I've been building for 3 years. And I knew who. The question was how to prove it. In the morning before 8 o'clock, I called Lori Bishop, the same woman I went to for therapy. But now I didn't need a therapist. I needed a lawyer. And Laura, as it turned out when we first met 3 years ago, had 2 degrees, one in psychology and one in law. Diana? Her voice was sleepy. It's 7:50 in the morning. What's going on? I need legal help, urgently. Pause. Come to my office at 9 and bring all the documents you have. I arrived at 8:45. Laura was already waiting, a cup of coffee, a business suit, glasses on her nose. She listened to me without interrupting, taking notes. Show me the letter, she said when I finished. I handed her the printed copy I had taken from Vernon's office yesterday. Laura studied each line carefully. The signature is similar but not identical, she said, taking out a magnifying glass and looking closer. See? The slant is slightly different here, and here the curve is too straight. It's a copy, most likely scanned from another document and pasted here. How can we prove it? Technical expertise. We need a digital forensics expert. I know someone, Miles Tanaka. He works with the police and private clients. He's expensive, but he's the best. How much? $5,000 for the initial examination. Maybe more, if we need to dig deeper. I didn't hesitate. Make the arrangements. Laura made the call right away. An hour later, the 3 of us were sitting in her office. Me, Laura, and Miles Tanaka. He was a man of about 37, of Asian descent, wearing glasses with a laptop and some portable equipment. I need the original letter, he said. The electronic version, and access to your work computer. The letter came to Freightway Inc.'s email. I explained. They forwarded it to my uncle. Okay, give me the forwarded version and your email address. I need to check if it was really sent from there. I gave him access. He worked for an hour, silently tapping on the keyboard and running some programs. Finally, he looked at us. The letter wasn't sent from your email, he said. It was created to look like it was sent from there. The email header was forged. But if you dig deeper, the IP address doesn't match the one you usually work from. I felt the tension ease a little. Where was it sent from? From a computer in your office, but not yours. From a guest computer in the common area. The one next to the printer. Laura leaned forward. Can you find out who exactly? If there are security cameras, yes. And one more thing. Miles turned the laptop toward us. There are traces of USB flash drive use on the guest computer. Someone copied files, your company's letter templates, signature samples. He looked at the date, 6 months ago, March 23rd. I tensed up. March 23rd. I tried to remember what had happened that day, and then I remembered. Gwen. Gwen had come to the office. "Laura?" I grabbed her arm. "My sister, she came to my office twice in the last 6 months." "When?" I took out my phone and checked my calendar. The first time was March 23rd. The second time was on June 15th. What was she doing there? I closed my eyes, trying to remember. The first time she came, it was like she was trying to make up. She brought coffee and croissants. I was in a meeting and my assistant told her. Gwen left the box of croissants on the reception desk and left. But before that, she went to the bathroom. It's next to my office. She was there for about 15 minutes. And the second time? The second time, she was waiting for me in the lobby. When I went to meet with a client, I opened my eyes. The security guard later said she was lost. She entered the staff area where the printer and guest computer are located. He took her out of there. Miles and Laura exchanged glances. "We need the camera footage," Miles said. "For both dates." I called Vernon. The conversation was short and cold, but he agreed to give us access to the security camera archives. Miles spent the next 2 days analyzing the recordings. I sat at home and waited. I didn't go to work. Vernon gave me leave until the circumstances were clarified. I knew what that meant. He didn't believe me, not yet anyway. Finally, Miles called. "I found it. Come to Laura's office." I arrived in 20 minutes. Miles showed me the video on his laptop. The first video was from March 23rd. Gwen enters the office, talks to the assistant, leaves a box. Then she walks toward the bathroom. But she passes the restroom and enters a side corridor where there are cabinets with documents. The camera shows her looking around, opening one cabinet, and taking out a folder. She quickly photographs several pages on her phone. She puts the folder back in its place. She leaves. The second video is from June 15th. Gwen is sitting in the lobby, waiting. When I leave the office and head for the exit, Gwen gets up. She follows me. But then she turns toward the personal area. She goes in there. The camera shows her sitting down at the guest computer. She takes a USB flash drive out of her bag and plugs it into the computer. She works for about 10 minutes. She removes the flash drive and stands up. At that moment, a security guard stops her. "That's her," Miles said. "She copied the templates and signature samples, and Dexter, who worked for you and knew the internal procedures, wrote the letter to make it look plausible." I looked at the screen, at my sister who stole my documents, who helped Dexter frame me. "What now?" I asked quietly. Laura spoke up. "Now we go to court. We file a lawsuit against Dexter for forgery and fraud. Gwen is an accomplice. We have evidence, video, digital traces, signature analysis. It's a criminal case. How long will it take?" "Months, maybe a year. It depends on how quickly the case progresses." I nodded. "Go ahead." Laura filed the lawsuit the following week. Dexter was summoned to court. So was Gwen. I showed Vernon all the evidence, the video, the analysis, Miles's conclusions. He was silent for a long time, staring at the laptop screen. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have believed you." "You didn't know?" I shrugged. "I would have doubted, too, if I were you." He looked at me. "Go back to work and don't ever bring your family here again." I smiled bitterly. "I won't, I promise." The trial began 3 months later. Dexter hired a lawyer. Not a very good one, judging by how he looked at the hearings. Gwen sat next to him, pale and tense. His parents were there too, sitting in the gallery with stony faces. Laura did a flawless job. She presented all the evidence. The video, the expert analysis, the digital traces. Miles Tanaka appeared as an expert witness and explained to the judge how the letter had been forged. Dexter's lawyer tried to argue, but the evidence was irrefutable. Gwen confessed under oath. Yes, she had gone into the office. Yes, she had photographed the documents and copied the files. But she said she didn't know what Dexter needed it for, that he just asked her to help get sample documents for his new job. Dexter also tried to justify himself, saying that he didn't want to frame anyone. He just wanted to get a decent job, that he made a mistake. But during the hearings, another detail came to light, a detail that changed everything. Dexter was in the country on a work visa that had expired 8 months ago. He hadn't applied for an extension. He was here illegally, and his marriage to Gwen, a marriage that happened so quickly, so lavishly, turned out to be partly fictitious. Dexter used it to try to legalize his status, but he never applied for a green card. The prosecutor brought this up, and Dexter fell apart. He began to get confused in his testimony, contradicting himself. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a stern face, listened to everything and made her decision. Dexter Morrison was found guilty of document forgery and fraud. He was deported from the country and banned from re-entering for 10 years. His marriage to Gwen Kershaw was dissolved due to the discovery of its fictitious nature. Gwen Kershaw Morrison was acquitted of criminal liability due to insufficient evidence of intent, but was fined $5,000 for illegal access to private property. I sat in the courtroom and listened to the verdict. I felt emptiness, not victory, not relief, just exhaustion. Gwen was crying. Dexter was led out by security guards shouting something about injustice. My parents sat motionless. I left the courtroom first. I didn't want to face them. But Gwen caught up with me in the parking lot. "Diana!" She rushed toward me, her face covered in tears. "Diana, wait!" I stopped. I turned around. "What do you want, Gwen?" "You ruined my life," she shouted, and people around us turned to look. "You took my husband. You've always been jealous of me. You've always wanted to hurt me." Something inside me snapped. All the restraint, all the calm I had built up over months. "I envied you." I took a step toward her. "You got everything. Money for the wedding. Your parents' love, their support. I got nothing. And instead of being grateful, you decided to set me up. You helped Dexter forge documents to destroy my career. And now you blame me. He's my husband. You had to help me. He used you." I spoke loudly, not caring who heard. "He married you to stay in the country. He didn't love you." "He loved his parents' money and connections, and you were too blind to see it." Gwen swung at me. I caught her hand. "Don't you dare," I said coldly. "I don't owe you anything. You made this choice yourself. You helped him set me up. Now deal with the consequences." I let go of her hand and walked to the car. Gwen stood there crying, but I didn't look back. The next few weeks were quiet. Dexter was deported. Gwen disappeared. She moved back in with her parents, as I heard from Laura. My parents didn't call. I thought it was over, that I was finally free of them all. I returned to work. Vernon treated me as he had before, with respect and trust. My colleagues did too. The case became well known in the industry, and everyone knew that I had been framed. My reputation was not damaged. On the contrary, I was respected for not giving up and proving the truth. Life was getting back to normal. I thought the worst was behind me. But 6 months later, Vernon called me into his office again. And again, his face wore the same expression, sad and angry at the same time. "Diane," he said, "we have a problem, a big problem." He turned the computer monitor toward me. On the screen was an email from one of our biggest clients. The letter said that they were terminating the contract because they had received a better offer from Freightway Inc., and that Freightway somehow knew all the details of our agreement, prices, terms, and conditions. "Someone is leaking information to our competitors," Vernon said. "And this isn't the first time. We've lost 3 contracts in the last 2 months. It's always the same scenario. Freightway beats us with a better offer, knowing our terms." I looked at the screen and a chill ran down my spine again. Who could have leaked the information? Vernon looked at me intently. Dexter worked here for 6 months. He had access to some internal documents, and your sister stole files. The question is, what exactly did they manage to copy, and who did they give it to? I closed my eyes. Does Gwen work at Freightway? Check it out. Vernon leaned back in his chair. Because if so, we have another lawsuit on our hands. Only this time, it's for millions of dollars. I left the office, took out my phone, and called Lori. I need your help again, I said. Urgently. That wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. A week after talking to Vernon, I was sitting in Laura's office with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Gwen Kershaw Morrison, Laura read from her computer screen, started working at Freightway Inc. 4 months ago. Position, Customer Relationship Development Manager. I was silent. Of course she works there. Diane, Laura looked at me, this is serious. If she passed on information that Dexter copied from your company, that's theft of trade secrets, a criminal case plus a multi-million-dollar civil lawsuit. How are we going to prove it? We need a technical audit. Miles needs to check what exactly Dexter copied before he was fired, then compare it with what Freightway is currently using. If the files match, we've got a case. I nodded. Do it. Miles Tanaka showed up the next day at the TransLink Solutions office with his equipment. Vernon gave him full access to the servers and system logs. Miles worked for 3 days. I hardly slept, waiting for the results. Finally, he called. I found it. Dexter Morrison had copied the files 2 days before he was fired. He used a personal USB drive and copied about 23 documents. Internal price lists, client contracts, strategic plans, analytical reports, everything he had access to as a coordinator. My chest tightened. 23 documents, God. That's not all. Miles's voice was serious. I compared the metadata of these files with the information that Freightway is currently using. They are identical. The creation dates, authors, versions, everything matches. These are the same files. How did you get access to the Freightway files? Don't ask, he chuckled briefly. Let's just say I have connections, but that's enough for court. We can prove that Freightway is using stolen information. Vernon filed a lawsuit a week later against Freightway Inc. for illegal use of trade secrets, against Gwen Kershaw Morrison as an accomplice. The amount of the claim was $2,300,000, which corresponded to the company's estimated losses from lost contracts. Freightway hired a powerful law firm. Their lawyers arrived at the first hearing in expensive suits, with stacks of files and confident smiles. Gwen sat among them, pale, in a black business suit. Her parents were there again in the audience, aged and tired. Freightway's lawyers claimed that their client, Gwen Kershaw Morrison, had been hired as a regular manager. She did not know the origin of the information the company was using. She acted in good faith in performing her job duties. Gwen confirmed under oath that Dexter had given her some files before his deportation, but she thought they were his personal notes, his own work. She didn't know it was stolen information. The court was on her side. Gwen cried during the hearings, looking like a victim. Her lawyers painted a picture, a young woman abandoned by her husband, just trying to survive and start a new career. Laura was nervous. So was I. We could lose. We need Dexter, I said to Laura after another hearing. Only he can confirm that Gwen knew. He's in the UK. Now he's banned from entering the country. The court won't call him as a witness. What about a video call? International testimony? Laura thought about it. Maybe, but first we have to find him. I hired a private investigator, a man named Tobias Granger, 50 years old, a former police officer. Within a week, he found Dexter. He was living in Manchester, working as a dispatcher for a small transport company. Laura arranged a video call through the international court. It cost extra money, time, and nerves, but we agreed. Dexter appeared on the screen in the courtroom. He looked worse, tired, aged, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw Gwen on the other screen, his face contorted. Laura asked him questions clearly and to the point. "Mr. Morrison, did you transfer files from TransLink Solutions to Gwen Kershaw before your deportation?" "Yes," he replied briefly. "Did she know they were stolen files?" Pause. Dexter looked at Gwen. She looked at him imploringly. "Yes," he said finally. "She knew. I told her I had copied the files while I was working there. She asked me to send them to her because she was going to apply for a job at Freightway. She said it would help her get a good position, that she deserved a fresh start after I had let her down." Gwen jumped up. "He's lying. He's getting revenge on me." The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, Miss Kershaw." "Why are you giving this testimony now, Mr. Morrison?" Laura asked. "You could have remained silent." Dexter smiled bitterly. "Because she didn't fight for me. When I was deported, she didn't even come to say goodbye. She didn't write a single letter. Nothing. She only needed me as long as I was useful to her. Now she has to pay." Freightway's lawyers tried to discredit his testimony, but Miles presented technical evidence. File metadata, copy dates, coincidences. Everything confirmed Dexter's words. The trial lasted another 2 months. Freightway tried to negotiate a settlement, but Vernon refused. He wanted a public admission of guilt, and he got it. The judge ruled in favor of TransLink Solutions. Gwen Kershaw Morrison was found guilty of theft and illegal use of trade secrets. She was ordered to pay compensation in the amount of $650,000. $650,000. I sat in the courtroom and listened to the number. It was money that Gwen never had and never would have. The judge continued. Gwen's salary is being garnished. 80% of her income will go toward paying off the debt. Freightway Inc. is firing her for violating ethical standards. But because of the court ruling, she is required to work at any job to earn income for the payments. The debt would take approximately 15 to 20 years to pay off. Gwen sat and cried silently. Her mother hugged her. Her father stared at the floor. I left the courtroom first. I didn't want to hear anything from them, but they found me. A month after the verdict, my father called me from the same number I had blocked 5 years ago, but I changed the settings. The number was unblocked after the court case because my lawyer said we might need to be in contact. "Diana," my father's voice sounded old. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About Gwen, about the family, about everything. Please, just one meeting." I should have refused. I should have. But something made me agree. Maybe I wanted to see them one last time, to close this chapter for good. The same coffee shop where we met last time. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I arrived 15 minutes early again. I ordered coffee and sat down at a table by the window. I looked out at the street and thought about how much had changed since I last sat here. They walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, and Dad, Mom, Gwen, all 3 of them. They looked broken. Dad was grayer, thinner, with wrinkles I didn't remember. Mom was missing her usual sparkle in her eyes, her confidence. Gwen was the worst of all. Pale with dark circles under her eyes, wearing a cheap sweater. She was no longer the bright girl I remembered. They sat down across from me. They were silent. Finally, my father spoke. "Diana," his voice trembled, "we came to ask for forgiveness." I looked at him silently. We made mistakes. Many mistakes. With you, with Gwen. We didn't see what was happening. We didn't understand. "What exactly didn't you understand?" I asked quietly. My mother spoke, her eyes red. "That we lost one daughter while trying to save the other. That we treated you unfairly. That you deserved better." "I'm 29 years old," I said. It took me almost 30 years to hear this. "Why now? Why not when I begged you for love?" "Because we were blind," Dad clenched his fists on the table. Because we were used to behaving that way. Because, he looked at Gwen, because we thought she needed more. And you're strong. Strong, I repeated. I'm not strong. I just learned to survive without you. Gwen spoke for the first time, her voice hoarse. Diana, I know you hate me, and you have every right to. I did terrible things. I helped Dexter frame you. I used the stolen files. I ruined everything. Yes, I nodded. You ruined it. But now I'm paying for it. She looked at me, and there was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Despair. I work 2 jobs, cashier at the supermarket in the morning, cleaning lady in the evening. I earn minimum wage. 80% of it goes to pay off the debt. I live in a 1-room apartment with 2 roommates. I have nothing, and it will be like this for 20 years. I was silent. Diana, my father leaned forward, we're not asking you to forgive us. We're not asking you to forget. We're asking for help, for Gwen. You have connections, money, maybe you could... What? I interrupted him. Pay off her debt, get her a job, save her again? At least make it a little easier, my mother said quietly. She's your sister. I sat and looked at them all. At my father, who never loved me as much as he loved Gwen. At my mother, who always justified injustice. At Gwen, who was used to getting everything and was now paying for her actions. And I felt emptiness, not anger, not triumph, not even satisfaction, just emptiness and fatigue. I don't rejoice in your misfortune, I said quietly. I didn't want this to happen. But I'm no longer the girl who begged you for love, not the girl who wanted to prove her worth in your eyes. I looked at my father. You made your choice back then, at that holiday table when you told me I didn't deserve help. Then at Gwen. You made your choice when you forged documents and stole files, when you decided to destroy me for your own benefit. Then at Mom, and you made your choice every day when you looked at injustice and remained silent. I stood up. Now live with the consequences. I don't owe you anything. I'm not going to save Gwen. I'm not going to make her life easier. She's an adult and she made her own decisions. Now let her pay the price herself or help her yourselves as before. Diana, please. Gwen reached out her hand, but I stepped back. Goodbye. I left the cafe and didn't look back. I got in the car and started the engine. My hands weren't shaking. My heart was beating calmly. I drove home, to my $2 million house, to the life I had built for myself. At home, I stood by the panoramic windows, looking at the city at the sunset. I thought about everything that had happened, about the pain I had endured, about the betrayal I had felt, about the long road to freedom. Was it worth it? Was all this pain, these years of loneliness, this struggle worth it? Yes, because now I am free, because I know my worth, because I no longer depend on their approval. The phone rang. A message from Uncle Vernon. Board meeting on Friday at 10 a.m. I want to discuss your promotion to vice president. You deserve it, Diana. I read the message twice. Then I smiled. Not out of revenge, not because my parents would now see my success, but because for the first time in my life, I truly knew my worth, and it did not depend on them. I replied, I'll be there. Thank you. I set the phone down and looked out the window again. The sun slipped toward the horizon, painting the sky red and orange, the glass warm beneath my fingers. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I would meet it not as a girl seeking approval, but as a woman who knows who she is. Steady, enough, and finally free. I breathed in, letting the quiet settle like a promise. Their opinions could stay out.